Dr. Sylvia Panich is joining us this evening. She's the medical director at Lakeview Integrative Medicine in Chicago. She incorporates both Western and Eastern modalities in the treatments of her patients and believes that many diseases are lifestyle related. Frequently sought for speaking engagements, the first time here, so we're really excited to have you at Cancer Wellness Center. Yeah. Her topics of interest that she, in her practice, and she speaks on is brain health, dementia, female health, menopause, osteoporosis, preventative medicine, obviously cancer, talking about that tonight, but many other medical issues. She's board certified in internal medicine. She's affiliated with many of the area hospitals in Chicago, and did your residency at Mount Sinai, is that correct?
Yes.
So, very excited to have her with us tonight. We're going to have the slides you should have copies of, and we will have time for questions at the end of the presentation. Please welcome Dr. Panich.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for inviting me. It's an honor for me to be here. We're going to learn today how hormonal imbalances impair detoxification, sugar imbalances may be at the core of many gynecological cancers, how we're going to test hormones and its breakdown products, we call that metabolites, to understand hormonal balance or imbalance. We're going to talk about diet, lifestyle, nutritional interventions, and all that we're going to try to improve our outcomes. I give several lectures through the year, and every time I like to offer a 15 minutes free consultation over the phone. I think it's my kind of donation to you. So whoever is interested can sign up over there, and I'll be more than happy to spend 15 minutes or longer with any of you on the phone, to help out with any particular needs or particular questions you might have. Anyway, now let's move on. So hormones, before I go on, yes.
So sorry. Just move this out of the way because I think that's pressing.
Oh, that's pressing. Okay, good. Okay. Thank you so much. Okay. So the statistics, especially about breast cancer, are very grim. The prediction is 1 in 8 women, they're going to develop breast cancers in their lifetime. Of course, breast cancer is one of the most common female cancers. So we're talking about 12.5% chances to develop breast cancer in a woman's lifetime. That's pretty sobering, I think. The statistics say that in 2018, 266,000 new cases of breast cancer were diagnosed. These are the aggressive type. And about 63,000 new cases of what we call carcinoma in situ were diagnosed. In 2017, the numbers look a little bit better, not a whole lot better, but they were lower. So the question is, what's driving up those numbers? So we're talking about a growing epidemic of breast cancer, and after the lecture, I hope I'm clear enough to convey the message. What are some of the factors that we all believe in functional medicine or integrated medicine that could be part of it? Hormonal balance is very complicated. When I was in medical school back in Argentina in the 70s, I would say, it was very simple, very simplistic, you see, let me see if that pointer works. Let me see. Okay, so here you see the brain, okay? This is your female organs. Here you have the ovaries and you have the uterus, okay? And it was kind of a two-way street. The brain influences the, gynecological organs back and forth, and that's it. But now we realize it's much more complex than that. So we see how the liver has a huge incidence, and we'll talk about that, because the liver is the main organ of detoxification, and that's one of the things I'm going to emphasize, how important it is, not only the amount of hormones that we have, but how we get rid of them. We're going to talk about the gut, how important is the role of the gut in cancers. Why? Because in the gut we have 80% of the immune system, and we'll talk about how the gut is another of the organs that help us detoxify. We'll talk about insulin and how the insulin, even diabetics, pre-diabetics, are at much higher risk to develop cancers in general, not only breast cancer, ovarian cancer, but cancers in general. We look at inflammation, and we'll talk about why inflammation is so important, making you more prone to develop not only cancers, but dementia, diabetes, heart disease, osteoporosis. So now the thought is everything is the underlying problem of many illnesses is inflammation. We talk about your adrenals because we cannot live with the adrenals. The adrenals are some glands that are sitting in our back, just on top of the kidneys. How adrenals make cortisol. Cortisol is one of the stresses hormones, but also makes epinephrine, norepinephrine, what we call catecholamines. You know, we hear about it as adrenaline, not adrenaline. How crucial is that? Because we will see how stress has a huge negative impact in not only cancer, but in general, everything else. And we'll talk about how thyroid is also connected. It's this whole complex equation because, you know, we rely on a healthy thyroid, you know, to function. But the thyroid also is, as you see, all the arrows are back and forth. The thyroid is also connected to everything else. So everything is connected to everything, basically. And this is a little joke, but you see the kind of portrays a little bit the body and the organs of women. So very complex, many things that, you know, play a role. So it's a joke, really. Excuse all the men here. And how man is a little simpler, you know, kind of 2 buttons versus who knows how many. Anyway, so mention again what I just said before. What disrupts the hormonal balance? And we talk about nutritional insufficiencies. We'll talk about that. Inflammation, we just said that. Aging, just the fact that we age, you know, we are more prone to develop cancers. Chronic stress, we talk about the negative influence of stress in everything. Adiposity, and we'll see how excess adipose tissue has a really negative effect in cancers, especially gynecological cancers, because we make extra estrogens in the fat tissue. So we don't want too many estrogens. We don't want too little. We don't want too many. Altered biotransformation, that means how are we able to detoxify, and we'll talk about what are the genes that code for detoxification. With toxins, you know, now the buzzword is toxins, glyphosate, we'll talk about that. Infections, genetic propensity. Some of you probably already know about BRCA, BRCA1, BRCA2. I'm not going to cover BRCA because, you know, you talk to your oncologist about BRCA. I'm going to talk about some other genes that, you know, that we care as primary care doctors about in our patients. Obviously, food, diet, smoking, you know, of course, it's a no-no. Food allergies, sensitivities, and intolerance. You know, many of us are walking around with significant food allergies, food sensitivities, like gluten, for example. And if you eating gluten and you have a gluten sensitivity, very easily diagnosed in specific blood tests, you're going to get inflamed. And we said that inflammation is a no-no. Good. All right. So this is, like I said, these are some of the hormones. And I want to call your attention, you can see in your slide better. On the top is cholesterol. As you see, cholesterol is way at the top. And remember, we need cholesterol. So all this craziness about lowering your cholesterol, like it's like the plague, is very dangerous because we see that cholesterol is the precursor not only of hormones, but it's a precursor of cortisol, it's a precursor of so many other things. So lowering your cholesterol too much, it could be deleterious to your health also. And what we call cortisol still is a fascinating event. Means when you are under a lot of stress, okay, the body tries to make more cortisol to compensate, right? So the stress is plenty in somebody who is at risk of cancer, who has had cancer, who's going through treatments. So we know that it's a very stressful time in people's lives. But as you will see down the road in the presentation, the more we can do to relieve stress is huge for your future recovery. But the other negative effect of cortisol, and we will see down the road, can make you diabetic if you have too much cortisol. And also, because the body is trying to make more cortisol, it completely blocks all these other hormones that we need to have a good lifestyle. I mean, a good life. So what we call that is cortisol steal. I don't know, some of you might heard, some of you might not. So let's talk about stress and why stress is so bad for us. We talked briefly already, but here is exactly why. So when you are under a lot of stress, you make a lot of cortisol, right? So when you have too much cortisol, we just talk about cortisol steal, meaning the body takes, when we are under a lot of stress, the body is very smart because redirects all the biochemical products to something that is vital, okay? So we can live with less progesterone or less estrogens, but we cannot live without cortisol. I mean, you will be dead if you have no cortisol. So by making more cortisol, the body automatically is gonna have less progesterone, and we're gonna create an imbalance, without even knowing, between estrogens and progesterone, right? So just to remind you, we have estrogen, we have progesterone, we have cortisol, and we have testosterone, okay? But mainly we're gonna focus on the balance between estrogens and progesterone. So these are two important hormones that even though when we go into the menopause, we still make them, and you will see where they're coming from there. So it's gonna lower your progesterone, and then you're gonna become what we'll talk about later, estrogen dominance. And that's the killer. That's the problem. If you are under a lot of stress, we're gonna spend all the cortisol we have. And you know that cortisol, when you have an inflammation, what you get? Cortisol creams, cortisol prednisone, or whatever. So we know that cortisol has an anti-inflammatory effect. So when you have little cortisol, then you're gonna have more inflammation, right? And we said inflammation is not good for us. And if we have a lot of cortisol, then you can become diabetic. And we know that it's not good for us to become diabetic when we have a risk of cancer or we have cancer. Why? Because cancer cells love sugar. So one of the main things we can do is to prevent you from becoming diabetic or even pre-diabetic, because the amount of insulin and sugar is really negative for your health. Okay. So again, the same graphic, okay? So all this influencing your hormone dysfunction, and of course the hormone dysfunction, you can call it fibroids, you can call it, endometriosis, you can call it cancer, whatever hormonal dysfunction affects you. So pesticides and in general, the environmental, and I think, it's not only me, I think there's a thought that the reason why there's so many cancers nowadays, even in young children, is because of the environment, okay? So look at all the things we are exposed to. We're exposed to pesticides, and no matter, and even sometimes, so that's what I tell all my patients, especially if you have any kind of cancer or a risk of cancer, or in general, I think everybody should be trying to eat organic as much as your budget allows. There is a lot of stuff, new information now about this famous Roundup called glyphosate, which is one of the worst things that we can be exposed to. Children are eating cereals, children are eating food that is full of pesticides, and you wonder, no wonder there's so many leukemias and lymphomas and cancers on children at such a young age. We are surrounded by plastics and plasticizers, and I tell, especially plastics are estrogenic, what we call xenoestrogens. Xeno means foreign, so plastics give us, when we drink it, extra estrogen. We don't need more estrogen. We have plenty in the environment. So, drinking water bottles, it's okay once in a while. But leaving your water bottle in a hot day in the car, that's a killer. You should never do that. So I tell everybody to drink from glass, from aluminum, but avoid plastics, because we have plenty of plastics everywhere. Fuels, I'm testing some of my patients for fuels, and even though the additives to gasoline are still showing up in the water, the MTBE, even though it has been forbidden, has been banned, they still start showing up in the water, showing up in the people's blood. It's really hard to eradicate. We talk about flame retardants. You know, our children and grandchildren are walking around with pajamas, and we think we're doing something good to them, and they have flame retardant. That's very toxic to everybody. We talk about dioxin, well known to be cancer-provoking. Teflon, phthalates, air refresheners. You know, how many people have air refresheners in the car and everywhere? Cosmetics, and we not talk about it a little more. Personal care additives and heavy metals. Well known, all these are cancer-provoking. Let me give you a little tip. There is a very interesting website called EWG, if you want to write down, EWG.org, okay, Environmental Work Group. They are non-profit, and go to the website. It's amazing information that you can get about the environment. And there's another one that if you're interested in your household products, in your cosmetics, it's called Skin Deep. You know, it's kind of a brand of EWG.org. And then you can put your cosmetic, your whatever, you know, even though, you know, the kids' suntan lotions and creams or whatever. And they grade it. So you have red being the worst, and they tell you why it's bad. Cancer-provoking, malformations in children, whatever. So it goes from red to green. Of course, you want the green. Great. Okay. So look at all the stuff these chemicals are doing to our bodies. Definitely fetal malformations. I mean, well known, all the stuff that is really deleterious to the fetus. Because it's interesting, I tell my patients also, when they, you know, I have a lot of young women too that are in childbearing age, and I tell them, you know, if you want to get pregnant, you know, I wish I would have known that. My kids are not okay. You know, oh, thank God our children are not okay. But I said there is a new field in medicine called preconception medicine, which I think is great. We look into the woman, we try to detoxify her, we look into her nutrient imbalances, if she has any toxins, because the minute you are pregnant, it's too late. You know, it's too late to start working on your health. Once you get pregnant, you know, the fate of the fetus is already sealed. Because you are, or, you know, when you're pregnant, the baby is going to be getting through the placenta a lot of stuff that the mom has. So we want to make sure, you know, if we had a choice, women should start working on her health way before they get pregnant. So fetal malformation, thyroid disruption is well known. Many of the toxic metals disrupt the thyroid. No wonder it's such an epidemic of thyroid disease. Neuroendocrine disruption, obesity. You know, some thought that obesity may be due not only for, you know, eating too much or exercising too little, but also a lot of chemicals may be causing obesity. Insulin and glucose, you know, balance. So all this stuff that we just talked about cause a lot of sugar and things, and we know that, like I said before, sugar is really bad for cancer. Male and female reproduction, how there is such an epidemic of infertility, both in men and women. The question is why, you know? Nothing has changed, it's the environment that has changed so much. Breast and prostate cancer, you know, neuroendocrine system and cardiovascular issues as well. You know, we know about lead, we know about mercury. So many things are disruptors. So one important thing, and I have a lot of passion, but genes is becoming a big factor, you know, and I'm studying a lot of these genes. And even though we think, we have sometimes a fatalistic attitude, we think, well, you know, I'm born with those genes, I'm destined to have blah, 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 whatever. You might have a genetic predisposition. And I think I want you to be aware because, you know, we've seen families that everybody got cancer, but we also, you know, because of their genes, but also we see siblings that one gets cancer and the other one doesn't. You know, you wonder why. You know, one had a really great lifestyle, the other one didn't. So I like this expression, genes load the gun, but the environment pulls the trigger. So it's, you know, we might have the worst gene in the world and we might not get cancer. We might have the best genes in the world, but if we live a bad lifestyle, then we might get cancer. So genes are not your fate, they are not your destiny. So a little bit briefly, I'm gonna, because this is a little too detailed, so we're gonna look into how we get rid of all the toxins. We talk about how bad is the environment for us. So there's different ways, and you will cover them all, how we get rid of our extra hormones. So the liver is one of the big ones. And the liver has what we call 2 phases of detoxification. Phase 1, okay? And then we talk about phase 2. And in our practice, we check pretty much most of these genes in people who either have cancer or have predisposition to cancer, or they just want to know what's going on with them. So plenty of some of the genes, because they code for enzymes, and those enzymes we need for detoxification. We can test those genes, you know. We can do 23andMe. Some of you might have heard about it. Or we can have what we call specialty labs. One of them that I use very frequently is Genova Diagnostics. And Genova takes, I think nowadays, almost all insurances, and also takes Medicare. But unfortunately, for that particular test, for the genomic testing, they don't take insurance. But sometimes it's worth spending a little money and knowing what makes you more at risk for recurrence or for just developing cancer. So it's something that I do often in my patients that either have cancer, breast cancer, or they're at risk. It's a special ratio of 2:16, because estrogens, you know, and even though myself, I didn't know more, but there is not only one estrogen. We think that estrogens is one thing. You know, there's different kinds of estrogens. We have estradiol, we have estrone, and we have different metabolites. So what the problem is, how our estrogens are being broken down in the body, okay? That's the main thing. Are they, I tell my patients, are they going, you know, opening a good door, or they going into a bad door? When you open a good door, we said a 2-hydroxy, okay? When you go into the bad door, we'll see how we call a 16 or 4, okay? So I don't want to overwhelm you with information you might not know. But basically what it matters, remember that, is there are many kinds of estrogens and many kinds of breakdown products of the estrogens. And based on many factors, your nutritional status, your genetics, is how those estrogens are going to be broken down, how they're going to be eliminated. So if you go towards the 2, the right door, you are safe. But it's interesting, when you test patients that already have the cancer, we see the 4 or the 16. So we know, had we known before, sometimes we might, I'm not saying for sure, we might have been able to kind of manipulate those genes a little bit. I hate the word manipulate, but to support those genes so they go the right way. There are ways to support these genes. That's the beauty, I think. So people who have a high ratio, what we call 2/16 ratio, have high ratio, less incidence of breast cancer than the ones that have a lower ratio. And the 2:16 ratio is available both in urine and blood. So you can ask your doctor, what's my 2/16 ratio? And if they haven't done it, maybe they can do it. Very easy, okay? So again, a little bit about my least favorite topic, because I don't like pesticides, is again the glyphosate. I have glyphosate, or called Roundup, and unfortunately now that, you know, Monsanto and whatever has looking into even stronger pesticides, because Roundup is not even enough. You know, they look at the effect of Roundup in the plants and stuff, and it's not even killing the bugs as they want to. So they're looking into doubling or tripling the amount of pesticides they are using in our food supply. Talking about food supply, I always tell my patients, you know, there is Dirty Dozen. Anybody heard about Dirty Dozen and Clean 15? So I tell my patients, if you have a tight budget, at least when you buy organic, at least buy from, you know, all the foods that are in the Dirty Dozen, okay? They call it Dirty Dozen because the ones that are sprayed much worse, you know, much more often than the Clean 15. So, for example, avocado, you don't have to worry about organic. But if you have berries, or you have potatoes or onions, and so many other things, peppers. I mean, I can't remember the whole list of the 12. But those are things that if you have a chance, try to use organic. Because, people say, oh, some people, patients say, oh, I haven't developed cancer or whatever until now, but it's, you've been lucky, but there is a limit. The body can put up to so much. Keep on adding junk in your body, and eventually you're gonna pay the price. So it's not that because you haven't got a problem now, that means you will never have a problem. The more you expose your body, like I said, there is a limit. So the body says, I got it, I can't take it anymore, I'm giving up. So look at glyphosate, it's toxic, it disrupts your hormones, because definitely there are theories about breast cancer in glyphosate. And we talk about, all the malformations and things like that. And even though when they call probably, I mean, it's a definitely yes, but there's a lot of politics around Roundup and pesticides and the environment, so you have to protect yourself, because I think if you don't, nobody else will. That's my philosophy. We are, constantly exposed, women in particular, with all they said. By the time you go out, to go to work or whatever, the amount of chemicals that we put in our bodies, between the lipstick and the mascara and the shampoo and the creams and blah, 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 blah. So we put maybe 150 chemicals on our faces every day, just to see one day, okay? So that's what I said. If you are curious about it, go into to this website that I told you and try to Google what you're using and is it safe or not? And, make some good decisions about it. So here a little bit again, estrogens, so again, cholesterol is a precursor, so remember, lowering your cholesterol with those statins is not such a good idea all the time. There are cases where statins are indicated, but don't lower it too low, because as you see, it's a precursor of all your hormones, progesterone, testosterone, estrogens, and so on. When we get into the menopause, I mean, it's not that our estrogens completely disappear. Of course they don't, otherwise you couldn't function. But so once the ovaries fail, because of the menopause, then we start making estrogens in other parts of the body. One is your adrenals. You remember, adrenals control stress. So a woman who had a very stressful life goes into the menopause, in a really bad shape, because now you don't have the ovaries, your adrenals are shut down, so what you got left? So we gotta take care of our stress. Then we talk about obesity, because too much excess fat causes too many estrogens, and we need estrogen, we don't want too much. Okay, so all these other sources occur after the menopause. So we talk about ovaries, we talk about fat tissue, some not so much in the muscle, some quite a bit in the adrenal glands, and some estrogens we get, and we talk about this is very interesting, because there is a way for the body also to get rid of the excess estrogens via your stools. So somebody who's constipated, that's not a good thing, because when you are constipated, what happens, these estrogens, they have no place to go, and they're going to be recirculated. So there's a way for us to test if the patient is recirculating her estrogen. So we talk about liver, now we talk about a little bit about stools. So at least there are two things that you already know how we're going to get rid of the excess estrogens. Again, the same graphic to just emphasize all the things that we need to keep in mind that have to do with hormonal imbalance. So inflammation, you remember I talked about how bad is inflammation, that inflammation is at the core of so many diseases. Excess adipose tissue, like I said, if you have too much fat, that fat is what we call inflammatory. And the worst fat is not the fat in your hips, it's the fat in the stomach. That's the worst fat. So people, there's two kinds of bodies. They call it pear and apple shape, okay? The apple shape is kind of the worst because you have all the obesity in your stomach. People have this beer belly, whatever. So that's the worst fat. Too much fat is no good for anybody, but that particular fat is the worst, So obesity by itself is a chronic inflammatory state. And why the correlation between obesity and cancer? Because in the fat tissue we make estrogens. Through testosterone becomes estrogens. That's what we call aromatase. It's an enzyme that converts the testosterone into estrogens. And we don't need all these extra estrogens. Let's keep a little bit here. Estrogens also, and it's interesting because the more estrogen you have, the more estrogen you make. So it becomes kind of a vicious circle where, because of some chemical reaction, like I said, the more estrogen, more inflammation, more estrogen. So we gotta break that cycle of insanity, basically. We talked about a little bit before, I just gave you a heads up, there are different kinds of estrogens, right? We talk about estradiol, estrone, and estriol. And every estrogen is important in different stages of our life. For example, estrone is very common in menopause, okay? Estradiol is more common in childbearing age, okay? And estriol is mostly common in pregnant women. So different kinds of estrogens, different kinds of breakdown products of estrogens. But we talk about xenoestrogens, and that's the problem. Xeno means foreigner, right? Foreign. So the problem is now with added problem. We have our own estrogens that in some people are not being eliminated well. We make too many. We eat foods that have, dairy products that have growth hormones, and dairy products and meat that have, growth hormones. So growth hormones make more estrogen. So these xenoestrogens, unfortunately, and look at what they're talking about. PCBs, okay? We talk about DDT that has been banned but is still showing up. And equilin is the Premarin, okay? So Premarin, that's a really sad story with Premarin. I don't know if you remember the story that before, as estrogen replacement, before, I would say in the 60s, I think it started, women, when they were going into the menopause, first, sometimes they were called that they were crazy, women had anxiety, they had insomnia, and instead of thinking that they might have a hormonal imbalance, they gave them Valium, it drugged them up, that's another big story. But the problem is before, the first hormone that came in the market was Premarin, okay? And I'm surprised that some doctors are still prescribing Premarin. I mean, that's crazy, because Premarin comes from the pregnant female horse, okay? Has nothing to do with our own estrogens. So we call it xenoestrogens because they're chemical, and you will see how the real estrogens look like. The equilin is, because the equine means horse, has nothing to do with our own hormones. And there is some women who develop breast cancer or other kind of cancers because this particular estrogen was so weird, was so foreign to the women's body that the body couldn't get rid of it. So it started building up until it caused cancer. In many cases, I'm not saying everybody, but in many cases was, there was some link. So again, how important it is to detoxify, detoxify. So we have a parent compound, which is the original product, and then it goes through 2 phases of detoxification, and that happens in the liver. So like I said before, we are able to measure that important ratio, the 2:16 ratio. This is one of the companies that does it, but I checked Quest, which is kind of your mainstream lab. I found that they do the 2. So if you're interested, that can be done. Alcohol. We think alcohol, a little drink here, a little drink there, no big deal. Well, it is a big deal. They think women should be, not because of our body, our size, we shouldn't be drinking more than 7 drinks a week.
How much?
7.
That's
7.
a lot.
Well, you will be surprised how many women drink a lot more than that, If I don't ask the question, I don't get the right answer. Sometimes I have to ask the right question, Nobody wants to be called alcoholic. But the reality is, we have, talking about cancer here, but it's when women who had 2 or 3 alcoholic drinks a day, so let's multiply by 7, had a 20% higher risk of breast cancer. Okay, how easy it is at least to eliminate that particular risk factor. And you'll be surprised how many young women drink a lot. They go, the happy hour, whatever, work, pressures. But I think, middle-aged, older women have a little more savvy, but it's surprising how many young women drink a lot.
That's scary.
It's very scary, yeah? So it's not only, the liver and all the other stuff, and now we're talking about cancer. It increases your risk a lot. So for my patients, 2 glasses a week, I would rather do that. It's better if you had cancer or high risk or recovering, try not to drink at all. Because it's another issue that comes with a lot of alcohol, with the candida, which is a whole another topic for another time. But some of you seem like you know what I'm talking about. Okay. So you remember we talked about the gut, the colon, how important it is to have normal bowel movements. We take that for granted. We think, what difference does it make? Well, it does make a big difference because, like I said before, when you're constipated, your estrogens don't get excreted. The estrogens are going to try to go wherever they can, So if we are constipated, not only retaining more estrogens than you should, but we're retaining a lot of other toxins. And once they are not eliminated, they recirculate. They call them enterohepatic recirculation. They go from the liver to the colon and go back and forth. And it's like go over and over and over. Okay, so including some nutrients like choline, B vitamins, fatty acids. That's really good for bile because it's amazing how many people, they say, oh, I have my gallbladder, I have my liver, but their bile is stagnant. The bile is not working well. Your bile is another way where we can eliminate toxins. So we need healthy liver, healthy bile. Okay? Flax, and I'll talk about it, it's a whole slide about flax, how important it is to have a regular intake of flax. Because flax will help drag out from the colon the excess estrogens. Probiotics, everybody should be taking probiotics, especially as we get older, because there's so many studies now being done about what we call microbiota, which is your good bacteria. Good bacteria equals good health. Bad bacteria equals really bad health. And not only cancer, but everything else. So and it's interesting how the good bacteria makes a lot of nutrients, If you don't have the good bacteria, not only you don't feel good, you got bloated, you gassy, constipated, but also your immune system is shut down, you don't feel good, you don't digest good, you don't absorb well. So probiotics is a really little good addition, easy to do. 1 a day keeps the doctor away. And fiber, we all know we need to eat a lot of fiber, okay, for cholesterol, for your brain function, for cancer prevention, regulation of your bowel movements, for everything else. We talk about estrogen dominance, remember, that's the buzzword, estrogen dominance. We don't want to be estrogen dominant, okay? So it's like a teeter-totter. My daughter said, no, it's not called teeter-totter, it's called seesaw. I'm not born in America, so I don't know exactly. Is that teeter-totter or seesaw? I don't know, but she called it. It's the same thing? Okay, I call it teeter-totter, but anyway. So there has to be an exact balance between estrogens and progesterone. In the old times, when I was still in medical school, I remember, women have no uterus, let's say, they had a hysterectomy for unknown reasons, and they were given estrogens. They say, you don't have a uterus, don't worry about progesterone. That's a totally bad thing, because no matter if you have uterus or you don't have uterus, you still need to have your hormone balance, okay? So if you are getting some hormones, you need to balance everything else. So progesterone will balance your estrogens and improve that balance. Estrogen dominance, like I said, is the buzzword. What are the things, really bad things that happen when we are estrogen dominant besides cancer? We're talking about, PMS, for younger women, water retention, irritability, headaches, visual distortion, memory issues, big time, sweet cravings, pain in your breast, fibrocystic breast, irregular menses, heavy bleeding, PCOS, PMS, fibroids, endometriosis, and increased breast, endometrial cancer. By the way, I forgot to tell you in the beginning, men can get breast cancer too. I don't know if you're aware of that, but we should never ignore if you have a strong family history of BRCA1, BRCA2, whatever, men are not exempt because men do get breast cancer. And the problem with men, nobody thinks about it, nobody tests them, they don't get mammograms, and they can be overlooked. So remember that men, and I think it's about 4,000 men a year are getting breast cancer, believe it or not. So estrogen dominance, not only bad for cancer, but also bad for all these things. So why we get estrogen dominant? We talk about genetics and obesity. Remember about the fat that is making extra estrogens, inflammation. I already said that inflammation causes more estrogens. If you for genetic reasons, you can excrete your estrogens, and the stress that also induces low progesterone. Remember what I talked about the cortisol still initially? How does that block? Too much cortisol, too much stress blocks every other hormone. So we don't have the progesterone to balance the estrogen, that teeter-totter that I spoke about. So remember that estrogen metabolites influence breast, ovarian, endometrial, and cervical cancer. That's what we call it today, gynecological cancers. I didn't want to call it breast cancer because excess estrogens, can cause breast cancer, ovarian cancer, definitely endometrial cancer, and there are some thoughts also the cervical cancer. Cervical cancer is a little much less worrisome in some way. If regular pap smears and stuff like that, there's big advance in the detection of cervical cancer. Remember the number 2, the magic number 2. 2 is good, 4 and 16 is bad. So if you ever have a chance to have your what we call metabolites tested, remember 2 is a good number, 4 especially is the worst, and 16 is in the middle. Some nutrients that can help us, balance your estrogens. Resveratrol that comes in the wine. But remember, we say we're going to be careful. Let's take a supplement instead. Curcumin. I'm going to not cover all of them. I'm going to cover the most common. Curcumin. It's amazing the power of curcumin. Okay, that's why the Indians use it a lot. Spice their food. But curcumin has an amazing property for pain, inflammation, brain function. I had, and my husband is a witness, I had the worst sciatica in June, and all my friends were saying, what are you taking? What are you taking? This and this was, I'm taking curcumin. I recovered really quickly. I didn't take one Advil, one anything. That was it. Mark curcumin every day now from now on. Fish oils are really good, hugely important for everything. Brain function, anti-inflammatory, pain. I3C and we're going to cover that is a really very important nutrient that we need to have in our arsenal, if you want to incorporate some stuff. Quercetin, very important anti-inflammatory. And yeah, let's move on. So it's kind of a nice cartoon influence of exogenous estrogens. So the poor patient said, the cow said, sure, I look contented, but the truth is I'm awash in hormones. Poor cows, they're getting injected all the time. It's a horrible thing. So remember, we're gonna need to decrease the amount of estrogens again. So the other thing is dairy, and I briefly mentioned about dairy. Positive associations were observed between dairy product consumption and total and free estradiol concentrations. Young kids, are drinking milk like it's not tomorrow. I mean, it's really not necessary. And definitely adults, first of all, as we get older, we get more and more lactose intolerant. So many people, can't handle dairy products so much. And it's not, a very comprehensive nutrient, but if you don't buy an organic dairy products, they are loaded with estrogens and pesticides. Milk concentrations of total and free estradiol were 15% higher concentration of estrogens in the people who eat a lot of dairy. Okay, once in a while is fine, but so the statistics don't lie. Too much dairy increases the amount of estrogens in your body. Okay. So fiber. We talk about the importance of the gut, to get rid of the estrogens, and everybody, it tells a little bit about how much fiber. The importance of fiber. Fiber is huge for regulation. It binds the estrogens are eliminated to the colon. So we like to have a lot of fiber. Our findings suggest that dietary fiber can play a role in preventing breast cancer through non-estrogenic pathways among postmenopausal women. So just by getting rid of the estrogen in the gut, gets it out, then we decrease our total estrogen load. The microbiome, we talk about the microbiome, that's our probiotics, that's our good, gut, those are little buds. So we need to have a diverse gut, a little bit of everything. This is really interesting. You hear about what we call cruciferous vegetables, your broccoli, your cauliflower, your Brussels sprout, your cabbage, blah, blah, blah. These are huge. These are so anti-cancer products. They are really anti-cancer products, The problem is some people get bloated, they can't tolerate it well. But if you have to get something about nutrition, this is huge. 500 grams fresh broccoli daily for 12 days after 6 days of a standard diet increase our capacity to detoxify the estrogens. So don't worry about those, what they tested for, but just having in a daily basis for 12 days a lot of these cruciferous vegetables improve our capability of detoxification between 19% and 30%. That's huge. There is a product that I give to some of my patients. They call it DIM, D-I-M, or I3C. I don't know if some of you have heard. Which I like about that is a product that is kind of a concentrated cruciferous vegetables. Because sometimes you cannot eat too many. Sometimes we are busy. But, using this particular supplement, I3C or DIM, it's kind of the same thing, can help also with detoxification. Kind of makes you, instead of being a 4 or 16, remember those were the bad estrogens, switch you to the 2-hydroxy, which is the good one. So 200 to 400 of the I3C equals DIM, is another name, equals 1/4 of a head of raw cabbage daily. And so if you can get 1/4 of a head of a raw cabbage daily, you're in pretty good shape. So flax, we talk about flax, how important is flax. Doing flax on a daily basis also, just 1 tablespoon of ground, better if it's freshly ground, flaxseed, improve the ratio, okay? So 1 tablespoon a day of ground flaxseed have a dramatic effect in the way we metabolize, so eliminate the estrogens. That was very powerful. And other things, that we can do, green tea. Green tea has a very powerful antioxidant properties. It's good for the brain. Reduce the incidence of breast cancer. Polyphenols are the rainbow color, all the green, the fruits and vegetables, the colors, your raspberries, your berries, in general, apples. A Mediterranean type diet, not the what we call SAD diet, standard American diet, that's a no-no. So we need to look into more, Mediterranean diet, paleo diet, but paleo with the exception of not too much meat, but incorporate a lot of oils and olive oil, and our friends here from Israel know what Mediterranean diet is all about, and legumes, olive oil. Sulfur, like cruciferous vegetables, give you the sulfur. And sulfur is such an important nutrient, and it's really helpful for detoxification. Garlic, onions, all that kind of stuff. And exercise, we gotta exercise. That's not only important for cancer prevention, even though if you have cancer, and for brain. We need to keep our brains healthy as well. I always tell my patients a combination of yoga or some kind of mind-body, cardio, and weights. So we need to kind of try to incorporate all of it in our routines, as best as you can. This is, when I test my patients for hormones, I don't like blood, I don't like urine, I basically like saliva, okay? So that's something some of you might never heard about it. Why saliva? Because in saliva, I have a really good picture of people's hormones because they test for free hormones, okay? So when you have your hormones tested, if you have been, they don't really give you that particular value of free hormones. And so it's kind of bound by proteins. Our hormones travel in the blood bound to proteins, so you don't really get the picture. I mean, that's my way of practicing medicine. It's easy, you spit in tubes, and 4 tubes of saliva, and I get all your hormones, and I get your cortisol level. The only way accurately to test your adrenals and your cortisol level is really saliva. Okay? That's a lecture on itself another time if you are interested. But it's kind of nice, you put your symptoms and it tells you, estrogen dominance, progesterone deficiency, gives a good, accurate way. So weight loss, we talk about fat and decrease the adipose tissue. Of course, we gotta remove all the stuff that we have in our, cabinets, in our personal, care products, our cleaning supplies, your vacuum cleaner. Somebody told me something really cool that I never even thought about. If you have a service that comes to your house, they bring their own vacuums, it's a no-no, because they're dragging all the junk, all the chemicals from other homes, who knows what they're using, to your home. So I didn't know. That's a kind of a new thing that I'm trying to implement, just have your own vacuum and do your own thing. So we talk about food, personal care items, avoid the plastics as much as you can. If you need to do dairy, make sure it's all organic. Alcohol, we talk about alcohol, how important it is to cut back, minimize as much as you can. Stress, how bad is stress for us, diminish the stress as much as we can. Coffee, a little bit of coffee is okay, but not drinking a lot of coffee because it damages your adrenal glands if you drink too much, so it's not that great. And now coffee with the way it's being processed, who knows what's going on. Reduce inflammation, we talk about that. Eliminate the standard American diet. Try to, the doctor or whoever, nutritionist, prescribe an anti-inflammatory diet. So anti-inflammatory diet. Avoid inflammation at all costs. Some detox, there's a lot of diets one can do, detox diet, Mediterranean diet, whatever. Increase the vegetables, but hopefully you pick the right ones from the clean 15. Avoid all this that are in the dirty dozen. Okay, so eating vegetables is good, but you're eating all the stuff that is laden with pesticides is not so good anymore.
What's that?
Huh? The vegetables.
The vegetables
Yeah.
without pesticides.
We'll try to. Okay, so like I said, if you're in a tight budget, at least focus on the dirty dozen and avoid those that are, I use only those organic. Okay, so you're okay to do the clean 15 non-organic. Okay, because we all have a budget, of course. Omega-3s are so important. The fish oils. Watch the mercury. I mean, no matter how we turn around, something happens. It's like really frustrating. So we gotta watch the mercury in the fish now. My goodness, so you have to be careful. The big fish, if you choose fish, I tell my patient the smash. Okay, starts from sardines, mackerel. A is for anchovies. S is salmon, and the H is for herring. Thank you. Yeah. So smash are the safest fish you can eat. Smash. Okay. Smash. Yeah. And avoid the trans fats. I realize that the companies are putting in the labels 0 trans fats, but don't be fooled. When you read the labels, if you know what trans fats are, they can put a minimum amount of trans fats, and they may call 0 trans fats. So be careful with trans fats. Okay, they're not good for us. Coming to an end very soon. Address stress, exercise. don't go nasty. Sonia Lupin has some good tips in her website. CBT techniques, okay? Cognitive behavioral therapy was really, wonderful thing for people. Relaxation, meditation, progressive muscle relaxation. Primary care interventions are breathing, like I said, meditation, mindfulness. We live mindless. Most of the time we live mindless. Promote sense of, well-being and connectedness. Connectedness is such an important thing. Relatives, friends, don't be isolated, don't be by yourself, That's huge. That's very important in outcomes. People who are lonely, and there's so many Americans that are really lonely, they tend to do much worse in anything. Anything they do, if they are lonely, they don't have support groups, they do much worse. And biofeedback is a wonderful thing that it can be incorporated with anybody. And it's a really good technique. Soy products, there's some controversy about soy. I think soy is okay, providing you don't do soy supplements, because we tend to overdo it with soy supplements. And as far as soy, a lot of soys are genetically modified. So be careful with soy. I think soy is okay in moderation. It's good for your bones. They see in Japan, Japanese women have less incidence of cancer because they eat soy, but they don't eat the soy supplements. They eat soy. Okay? So I'm going to go a little faster. Again, the Clean 15 versus the Dirty Dozen. Organic if possible. Personal care products. Avoid these babies that have these BPA bottles. They call it BPA free, but they put a different toxin now that replaces the BPA. So thank you. Wow. Pesticides, some of the paints, be careful with the paints. Air refresheners, we talk about it. Cleaning products, we talk about it. Thank you. Okay.